How's it going, everybody? I hope you guys had a great end of 2024 and are ready to tackle 2025 in the best way possible. Now, I want to start this year right by suggesting some of the best books that I read last year to hopefully give you inspiration, hopefully give you like a boost for your 2025 and starting the year right with lots of knowledge. So in this video, I'm going to be sharing game-changing books, pun intended, about game design, animation, and inspiration, because after all, without inspiration, nothing gets done. So without further ado, let's get started in this first video of 2025. Okay, welcome. If you're new here, my name is Harvey Newman, and I've been a game developer for 20 plus years, and I like to share my passion for animation, game design, and much more here in this channel with all of you. Now, I'm going to start with books about game design because I am wearing a new hat as of the last 2 or 3 years, which is a game director and a studio founder. And what I found is that game design, and I kind of knew this, but it's really good to put it in practice. Reading books about game design makes you a better game developer no matter what you decide to do. And it makes you think in a much more game-driven way because you start to understand why certain decisions are made in game design for certain games. Plus, I think that you, specifically if you are in a director position as animation director, perhaps an art director, you reading about game design books allows you to have deeper conversations with the game director or the game designer or the lead game designer in your company, in your game, at any point. A lot of developers that I know, including myself, we gather the knowledge by doing the thing, right? And this is how we actually got the game design skills that we acquired over the years. But if you're new, I think these books will help you a ton. Now, the first book that I want to talk about in this section is A Theory of Fun for Game Design by Rolf Koster. I think this book is good for so many reasons, and if you actually want to become a game designer or want to know about game design, this should be one of your first pickups because Rolf writes very much in the same way that we developers think, which is a much more blasé, friendly, kind of like let's kick it kind of situation. And this is kind of how he actually puts and writes the whole book. One of the best points that I liked about this book was talking about the brain and how it works when it comes to games, and some of the psychology and theory of how we see patterns and how patterns make us really like something or not like something. And I do think that this is really important because what Rolf does in this book really well is that he basically breaks down things to a bare minimum, right? So even when it comes to talking about games and talking about like some of the most iconic games that you know out there, including Pac-Man, etc., how you can actually basically break down the game into one sentence. And if you actually break it down into a very simplistic way, it sounds kind of dumb, but this is the brilliance of the game. And breaking down things so simply makes people understand exactly what the game is going to be about and how fun it's going to be. And now that we talked about the first book, I have to say about how I'm reading as of late, because iPad, digital format, is something that I was not doing before. I was using physical books quite a lot of time and annotating and highlighting and writing. And it helps me a ton to basically memorize the knowledge that I gather from these books, which is great. But I found out as of late that using iBooks, iPad, and just basically the Apple Pencil to highlight things and also Readwise to sync my highlights ends up being infinitely better for me because it means that I have all my information into one place. So if you are interested in knowing more about my workflow and how I get all connected and how I actually gather this knowledge about game development, animation, and much more, drop a comment below. Let me know if you want to know more. I'll make a video specifically about that, how to set it up and how to get you guys sorted the same way I have. But I have to say, now reading feels way more enjoyable than it used to be when I was reading it on paper. I feel like now I have my knowledge centralized in one place and it feels amazing. Now, the second book that I would like to recommend is a book called Level Up, The Guide to Great Video Game Design by Scott Rogers. Now, this book is also incredibly accessible for anybody trying to read a fresh new book about design, but is more practical. And I think that when you think about design, I do think that most of us, level design, character design, all that stuff, we're thinking about the practicality of the design. And I think society nowadays have such a short attention span that you are looking for the meat and potatoes of what design is. And if you are one of those people, then definitely pick up Level Up, because that might be your best bet when it comes to practical design tips on how to actually get your game better. And it kind of motivates you and incentivizes you to sketch out certain things. So for example, when I was reading it and I was thinking about Warship Jolly Roger, the game that we're working on Proxima right now, I was thinking about how would these practical tips apply to our game when we are doing it. And I think what some of the practical tips that Scott suggests here in this book challenge you to basically think differently when it comes to your design, when it comes to your games, when it comes to the practicality of design, which is great. Now, the last book in this section is not really about game design per se, but I wanted to throw it in because of the state of the games industry right now. And this book is called Press Reset by Jason Schreier. Jason is this incredible journalist in the games industry that breaks out the news first every single time it feels, whenever anything goes wrong, and especially now that things are so tough, whenever big studios close or there's anything notable in the industry, normally you hear it first from Jason. So he's obviously very well connected, and he created this book called Press Reset that basically is talking about the tough side of the games industry. Talks about the studio closures, talks about the crunch culture, talks about the human cost of game development, which is incredibly eye-opening stuff, especially for those outside of the industry. But it's not all doom and gloom. He also talks about how some of the biggest studios out there actually were formed in the beginning. He goes back to the beginning of the Xbox days, for example. So before then, how certain studios actually failed a lot to get funding, which is something that we can relate to at Proxima right now. It's a hard time to actually get funding. So I think that if you are a games developer, or if you're thinking about starting your studio, if you're thinking about being an indie game maker, reading this book is a great tale of caution. I think it tells many stories in one book. Now, I know a lot of you are experienced developers watching this channel, so I have a question for you. In 2025, how do you think the games industry could better support us, the developers? Drop a comment down below, let me know, super curious about that. Now let's move on to animation books. Okay, so I actually made a video a while back about animation books and some of my favorite ones, my top 5 favorite animation books. Here, I'm going to try to switch it up a little bit and talk about some of the ones that I didn't mention that are also amazing to me. The first one is The Character Animation Course by Eric Goldberg. If you are an animator and you don't know about Eric Goldberg, stop this video right now and go and Google Eric Goldberg and absorb as much things as possible about this man. He's an incredible genius of animation, one of the best animators alive right now, and he's most known for animating the genie in Aladdin. And in this book, Animation Crash Course, he basically wanted to share his tips and tricks for how to get started with animation. But most importantly, the thing that you actually get the most from this book, or I got the most from this book, is how you should have characters with soul, that have a heartbeat, that have something to say. And this is something that he drives home every single time that you read the book, in every single chapter. And it was the first book that I read that made me think much more about the inside of a character instead of just the physical stuff that happens. And Eric breaks it down incredibly well. It's not a really difficult to ingest book, it's very thin and is incredibly good. So definitely a great book to have. Number 2 is going to be Acting for Animators by Ed Hooks. I had the pleasure to interview Ed Hooks here in the channel about this book specifically. When I read this book, when I was at uni as well, was another one that actually made me think about the thinking part of the character. It was all about acting, like how do you go about acting? And Ed is really renowned in the film industry because he was an actor and he actually went from studio to studio, DreamWorks, Disney, Pixar, every single studio, to give master classes to their animators on acting. So one of the things that we do in animation, well, we don't do in animation, is that as much as animation is acting driven, we don't study acting, we just study movement. And Ed is trying to fill that void by giving you tips on how to act And this is something that is kind of disconnected a little bit from animation, and you learn it through the years. You start putting those two together. But as an animator, a fresh animator, junior animator, when you first start doing this thing, 9 times out of 10, you're thinking about the movement of the character and you're completely ignoring this extra part of animation that is really important, which is acting. So Ed's book is another staple in the industry, is another book that you should buy, keep, and read over the years, just like Eric's. Because the more you read it, the more you will realize the information goes in a different way as you grow and expand as an animator. And then last, and this is a bonus, is this book called Directing the Story by Francis Glebas. Now, Francis was a storyboard artist at Disney for many years, has once again lots of knowledge, but this book, the reason why I call it a bonus is because it's good if you actually are interested in storyboarding. At some point in your life, you will want to tell a story, doesn't matter if it's via games, VFX, or cinema. So getting to know these things, getting to think about these things as early as possible will show you how impactful it is to actually, via the visual medium of a storyboard, to tell your story in a much better way. So this is incredibly important. So if you're interested in storyboarding, definitely check out this book. It's really, really cool. Inspirational books. This is the last section for you guys. Now, inspirational books, I consider the ones that, at least to me, make me understand a little bit more about the games industry, also make me think about the games industry in a new light. I'm also a big believer that if you actually want to change and mold the future of your industry, in this case game making, you should learn about the past of what has happened. Now, I think the best book to do this is this book that I read last year, which was fascinating, called The Ultimate History of Video Games by Stephen Kent. As soon as you start reading the book, you start to get like a storyline of what has happened in the games industry and the main beats, how we started, how we got here, and then goes into details. All the chapters are incredibly well named, so you know more or less what each chapter is talking about. So if you don't feel like reading every single chapter, then you can just jump. For example, if you're interested in knowing more about Punk, what happened there and how it happened, then you can jump to that chapter and find out more, or read from that chapter onwards, right? Or if you're actually more into like the latest, like Nintendo's or N64 or something like that, you can start from there and keep going from there. But one thing is true is that the storytelling and the narration is really strong and very appealing, and I think to me it was very entertaining to read, because the way he kind of tells the story, he kind of like name drops everybody that is interesting and that actually made a difference, and he shouts out some heroes that have been basically forgotten over time, right? So it's really good to get to know these people and get to know what they were thinking at their height as they were doing the best work possible. Very inspirational. It's a dense book, but it's actually a really good book. He also got me thinking about if I could work in any classic game that have ever come out since the beginning of game making, what would it be? And this is my question to you as you are watching this video. What would be a classic game, not a modern game, but a classic game that you would have loved to work on, that kind of like you think that it would be interesting to know what goes on behind the scenes? To me, it was Mario 64 for the N64. Like, I would have loved to understand some of the problems and problem solving that they've made in that game to sort out 3D as we know it nowadays. It's mind-blowing to me. So drop a comment down below and let me know what would be a classic game they would have enjoyed to actually work on over the years. Now, last book, bonus book for sure. Now, this company called Bitmap Books, they actually do these things. These books here, they look absolutely fantastic, and they are normally compendiums of different eras of game making. And as I was reading the ultimate history of games, I got more and more interested in kind of like seeing the games, understanding more about the individual games and what made them special. And going back to the Mario 64, to me the N64 era was really appealing because it was the height, at least to me, of my early teenage years, for me to understand how amazing games were, for me to understand that I really wanted to work in this industry. And what this does is give you a compendium of all of the best like games for that platform and what made them special. And some of the games I haven't even like heard of because there were so many games that came out of the N64 era. and they are really well written. As you can tell, text is incredibly tiny because they cram a lot of information within these pages, and it's really well put together. So if you are interested in knowing specifically from a fan perspective or game developer's perspective on what has happened in each game from a specific platform, highly advise you guys go into Bitmap Books and cop one of this because it helps you a ton, and also they look great in my book collection. Now, they were kind enough to give me a discount code for all of you, so you can find it down below and you get a 5% off from any book in their website only until February, which is next month. So if you're interested, definitely head out to the website, cop it. Highly appreciate it. I'm still going through it. I still haven't gone through all of them. Okay, and that is my favorite books of last year. These, I think, are must-reads for anybody that is serious about game making, game development, or just like interested in games hardcore. I think it's really good. So let me know, which one of these are your favorites? If you have any more suggestions, I would highly appreciate it. Drop a comment down below and let me know of books that you highly recommend for me to read for 2025, because I'm looking for more. I'm looking to actually make this video next year in 2026 and make it better than ever. So give me some suggestions and tell me what are your favorite books of 2024. Until next video, I hope you stay well, stay safe. Peace.